So, like I said, my name is Blake. I'm with the Bee Supply. I'm one of the owners, and great to be with all you guys. We have a lot of ground to cover tonight. It being March, it's the unofficial start to spring in many areas, and our bees are growing, our bees are thriving, and it is time to start thinking about, hey, what do we need to do for our bees this time of year? Even in cold areas, the bees are still, the queen is starting to lay a little bit. On warm days, you may have a little bit of a pollen flow. And so we're going to tackle all those things tonight and talk about what do we need to be doing to get ready for spring. Or if you're in the South, certainly the far South, you're already in spring. So we're going to kind of cover the whole gamut tonight, no matter where you are in the country. So as we get started here, and by the way, I'm coming at you from California tonight. I am wrapping up. We're wrapping up almond pollination in California, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later tonight. I'll show you some pictures of what I'm seeing out here. But I spend a lot of time in California, January, February, and March as we work to pollinate almonds. So we'll talk more about that later. But we still have bees for sale. So if you haven't bought bees yet, we do still have a few dates available. So for our single story hives, our nooks, our packages, our queens, so those are all still available. I'm sure you guys know at this point, but we've upped it to a 30-day guarantee. So if anything goes wrong with your bees in that first 30 days, we'll replace them for free. So certainly check out our bee options, and we'd love to help you get started in beekeeping or help you replace any losses. We are still we're shipping queens now. That's new for us this year. We're shipping a couple different breeds of queen, and we have our inoculated queens, so that are inoculated against foul brood, and those are available on our website too. So we're pretty excited to be shipping queens now. That's pretty new for us, and we appreciate the response already, and we hope to ship a queen to you if you're not nearby one of our branches. Okay, so this next thing, I'm pretty proud of this and pretty excited about this. This is something that no one else in the industry has ever done. This is something I've been toying around with for many years, and we've never actually launched this program until now. Um, so a big problem in beekeeping, of course, is we all lose lots of bees. I mean, that's part of beekeeping. You know, the average annual loss rate is 44%, and we all lose a lot of bees. And especially if you're a new beekeeper, that is super discouraging. You know, you get started in bees, you spend all this money, and then all your bees die in your first year. And a lot of people get out of beekeeping because of that. And so we wanted to find a way to help people stay in beekeeping or replace losses if you lose a lot of bees. And so we're offering the first ever for the industry a warranty, to where it's a year-long warranty. If you lose bees in your year of beekeeping, as long as you bought them from TBS, we'll replace them. So I'm going to play a quick video I made out in the bee yard that gives you a little more details about how this actually works, so that you can see how our bee warranty program functions.
Hey friends, Blake Shook with the Bee Supply here. I've been keeping bees a really long time at this point, over 20 years, and on all levels of beekeeping, small scale, sideline, commercial, and I interact with a lot of beekeepers. And one of the sad facts about beekeeping that everyone is shocked to learn, especially newer beekeepers, is that the average annual loss rate for beehives is 44%. And that's for professional beekeepers. New beekeepers often lose 50, 60, or even 100% of their hives. Bees are tough to keep alive. We've been combating that for years at TBS by giving a ton of free education through our monthly webinar, our monthly magazine, our blog posts, our e-blasts, our YouTube channel. We focus so hard on education because we so want all of our customers and all beekeepers to be successful. But even with all of that, we still see a huge percentage of new beekeepers or 2, 3, 4-year beekeepers stop keeping bees because they just lose so many hives each year, and they can't afford to keep buying new bees every year. Let's face it, bees are expensive. And anybody that complains about the price of bees should try raising them, and then you realize why bees are so expensive. But to help our customers, we've come up with an innovative idea that no one else in the industry has ever tried, and that is to offer a bee warranty. We are so confident in our bees and the quality of our bees, our education that we offer to beekeepers, but then we're so passionate just about making sure that you stick with beekeeping that we want to do something that's kind of crazy, and that's give you a inexpensive warranty that guarantees if you do lose your bees, we will replace them for free. The way this works is you simply buy one warranty for each unit you purchase from TBS. So each package, each nook, each single story hive, buy one warranty for each unit you purchased in the current season. And if you lose that hive, then we will replace it for free next year. The cool thing is, if you don't lose that hive, if you don't use any of your warranties, then we will give you a 50% refund next year. So there's really no way to lose. And again, beekeeping is expensive. Those bees are expensive. So this is a great, inexpensive way to safeguard your investment. And we make it incredibly easy. We want you to be successful. If you lose your bees, we want to replace them. So we don't make it difficult to file a claim. We're not going to hassle you over the details. All we ask is that you follow a really simple management guide that we give you, which asks that you properly feed your bees, that you properly monitor and handle varroa mites. And if you do those two things, then there's a one-page claim process if you lose your bees, and then we'll get you set up with a new beehive next year. If you buy feed and mite treatment and mite testing equipment from TBS, you don't even need to save those receipts. We'll automatically link it together on the back end, and you don't have to send us receipts or prove anything. We'll see that you purchased those goods and know that you're doing that to take care of your bees. If you buy those supplies from someone else, which you're more than welcome to do, we just ask that you snap a picture of those feed receipts and testing receipts so that if you do lose your bees, you can send us those receipts during the claims process to guarantee that, yes, you were taking care of your bees. Because what we don't want to do is encourage people not to take care of their bees because they have a warranty. So we do want to see that you are doing your best and taking care of your bees, but all you have to do is show that you did feed and you did treat or at least test for varroa mites. And if you do those things, we're good to go. So we're really excited about this. We think it's going to be a huge benefit to small-scale beekeepers as they struggle through the learning process of beekeeping to make sure that no matter what, you're going to end up with bees at a much cheaper price than rebuying every year. If you have questions, let us know. We've got a ton of information on our website, and we can't wait to see you in the bee yard.
So there you have it, guys. And I would highly encourage you. I mean, if you're a new beekeeper, or really any scale, check this out. So go to the website. That QR code will lead you right to the page on the website. But I mean, no one's ever done this because the loss rate of bees is so high. I mean, again, professionals lose 40 to 50% every year. And so if you buy the warranty, you know, you're getting new bees next year at a fraction of the price of purchasing bees. So there's really no way to lose on this, because even if you don't lose your bees, then you get a 50% refund on the whole cost of the warranty. So check it out. We'll send an e-blast out tomorrow about it. The price does go up April 1st. So encourage you to check this out ASAP. So Sherry, what do we have going on in the magazine this month?
Well, look at that. Issue 45. Gosh, look at
Amazing.
that picture, y'all. Do you love this picture? I just love it. I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta have that for the front cover. It's just too cool, too cool. So this is a great issue. And it's March, y'all. I thought it would never get here. I felt like the little beekeeper at the window going, open, open, open. I was so ready for spring to happen. So ready. So this issue is packed full of spring-ish things. We've got managing hive expansion. I bet you Blake talks about that tonight. What to do with excess honey. I hadn't thought about that. Blake wrote that. It's a really short article. You need to look at that because I hadn't thought about that. We've had hives over the years that have done that, where you come out of winter and they've got this overabundance that they didn't consume. So what do you do with that to make sure it doesn't get in your way of getting more nectar and honey put in? Split seasons ahead. And I bet we're going to talk a little bit about that. Biggie, here's a biggie, identifying and preventing swarms. Is it swarm season, y'all? It is. It is. And James and I will be talking about swarm indicators. Yes, who's with me? Look at his elbow. Look who's here. He's better. He's better. I'm so excited. My husband is back. And I chatted with Corey Stevens. If you don't know who Corey Stevens is, super cool dude. Yes, he falls under the cool dude category about queens. He is the knowledge beyond knowledge about grafting queens. Please go in and listen to that video. It's on our YouTube channel too. So you want to flip over to my featured article?
Sherry, I didn't put it in. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was traveling today.
I gave you
California,
one job.
and I know, and I blew it. So sorry, it's not in there.
I'll just tell.
You
want me to tell them about it, or you want me to skip it?
Please, no, please tell them about it. It was a great article.
All right. Well, y'all just pretend like you're looking at one of the articles that's in this magazine, and it's called 9 Easy Steps to Capturing Swarms. Another one Blake wrote, and I just love it. I'll tell you, the reason I love it is the first 3 steps have nothing. 3 steps have nothing to do with capturing the swarm. I just thought that was a genius, because it really is. Ask some questions. Okay, how many times does that happen to any beekeeper when you get a swarm call? Okay, the bees are 10 feet up in the air, 10 feet, and then you get out there, and 10 feet is really the top of a 40-foot, 50-foot pine tree. And that's not a little step ladder, right? So ask questions about what that looks like. Ask them for pictures. Ask them for pictures. It really makes a big difference. It gives you something to compare to. So if they're standing and the house looks, this little, anyway, you get the point. Pack up your gear and head out quickly. So how many times have these two been on a swarm call, and yeah, we hurried, but we got there and it was gone. That was where we learned to ask that question of how long has it been there? Because if it just got there, it may not stay. I would ask those questions too. Dealing with homeowners. Now I could fill up a program on that one right there, but I'm going to leave it alone. Just know that you're going to have them really watching you closely and invite them to do so, but you might want to bring some extra gear for them to wear. Steps 4 through 9 tell you exactly how to capture the swarm, but I had to pick on Blake a little bit. I love the article. It's pretty short, but it's a great one. Y'all go in and look at it and tell me what you think. Back to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sherry. That was
welcome.
A great summary. Thank you. Hey, real quick note. I was watching the chat while we're on the webinar, or while Sherry was speaking, and there's a few questions about the warranty, and one was, are you available? Is it available to people that haven't purchased bees yet? And the answer is yes. It's available to anybody that has already purchased bees from TBS but hasn't picked them up yet in this season. Or if you go out and buy bees from us now, you're eligible for it. So anybody that's purchased bees from TBS but hasn't picked them up yet is eligible. And yes, it's available for natural beekeeping too. Someone asked if I'm a natural beekeeper, is it available? And I don't treat for mites. Yeah, it's available for you as well. Okay, oh, Sherry, there it is. I did put it in there. Oh my goodness, look at that. No, that was from last year.
That is not
that was 2023. Well, I got something in there.
You
it's
did.
Just a year late. Okay, all right. So yeah, I was a year behind. Sorry. Okay, so California. So I'm in California right now. If you guys remember, we did a promo a couple months back where you could take a trip to California with me, and we go around and show you almond orchards and everything. And so that's happening this Saturday. And so I'm out here checking bees, among other things. But then this Saturday, I've got a big group of TBS customers that we're loading up into a couple of vans, and we're driving around looking at almond orchards, looking at bees, kind of showing you how almond pollination works in California. So we'll probably do it again next year. So if you didn't get in this year's group, don't worry, we'll try to get you in next year. But I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a sneak peek on what it looks like out here, so you get a quick overview. The picture on the left is just an almond orchard in bloom. The picture on the right, this is what we're seeing out here right now. So the bees bring in a lot of nectar and a lot of pollen in a very short period of time. When those trees are blooming, there's just unlimited forage for bees. And so they get a lot pulled in a short period of time. This is a friend of mine, and he's shaking a frame to show you how much nectar is in that frame. So check it out. When he shakes this frame, look at all that nectar raining out that the bees have just brought in one day. I mean, the bees can bring in, an entire frame of pollen and 10 to 12 pounds of nectar in one day when the almond trees are in full bloom. So it's just kind of amazing how quickly and how well bees grow and build up while they're pollinating almonds, because there's just so much food available, and it's really high quality food. It's not poor quality. The pollen is crazy high in protein. It's a very high quality pollen, and so it's just amazing for building bees. So thought that was a cool video to see all that nectar raining out of the frames. Turn down that audio. This is just iconic because this was the last load of bees that we put into the orchards for the season. This was several weeks ago. This was a yard that we were unloading bees off of semi trucks, and our trucks were headed out for the evening to put bees into orchards. And this was kind of at the very end of our season, getting bees put out into almond orchards. And now we're back to pick them all up out of orchards and send them back home from where they came from. So we spend several weeks putting them into orchards. We get a break for a couple of weeks, and then we're loading them all back up and shipping them back home. So these are some pictures I took today. So this is petal fall. That's not actually snow. You see, that's almond tree petals falling out of the trees. And when you get a gust of wind, it just looks like snow just raining down out of the trees. And so this is what most orchards look like right now. The trees are wrapping up the bloom period. Those petals are falling out of the tree. Just beautiful. Obviously, as you can see there, it just looks like snow when those petals are all falling. Of course, back home in Texas, our guys are building nook boxes. We're getting ready to raise bees to sell to you guys. So our crews are busy building nook boxes. We've already got bees back home in Texas that are being split and getting queens introduced to, and I'll have a lot more about that in April. I'm going to try, fingers crossed I have time. I'm going to try to kind of do a virtual tour for you guys of how we build bees for the April monthly buzz. Okay, so March tips. Let's jump out into the bee yard and, oops, went too far there. Let's see what's going on in our bees out in the bee yard. So let's jump out to the bee yard as we always do and see what our bees are up to.
Hey guys, welcome to March. It's so hard to believe that March is already here. I think I say that every month, so I need to stop repeating that. But the bee season's here. I mean, if you're anywhere in the southern half of the United States, you've got something of a pollen flow, even if it's a trickle. Northern half of the United States, even though you don't have a pollen flow yet in most areas, in some areas you're crazy early and you already do. But bees are still starting to grow a little bit. The queen's starting to lay as days get longer. So it's time in the south to start thinking about things like swarming and adding boxes, and splits will be here before we know it. It's time to start preparing for spring. Maybe you've bought bees and you've got new bees coming in. And so the season's here. And so today we're going to focus on things like swarming, like adding boxes. What does feed need to look like this time of year? What are some problems and issues we might run into? So we're going to tackle a lot in the bee yard today, and then we're going to talk a lot during the presentation about swarming and other things that we don't tackle out in the bee yard. And you're going to see in these videos, and in case you ever noticed, I'm wearing unapproved bee apparel. So I've got my sneakers on. It's because I'm bouncing back and forth so much between California and Texas this time of year that I don't like putting my work boots in the luggage back and forth. So I leave my bee boots out in California, and because I'm doing most bee work out there this time of year. And I realized right before I came to film this video, I was like, oh no, my boots are out in California. So don't ever wear black sneakers when you're working bees. I don't recommend that if you're a new beekeeper. This isn't proper bee footwear. But I'm sure I'll get a few stings on the ankles, but whatever. So anyway, let's jump out, let's see what the bees are doing and see what we need to be doing as beekeepers to prepare for the spring. Hey guys, Blake Shook with the Bee Supply here. So what does a just okay hive look like in early spring? And what should we do about it? So we're, this is March 6th or 7th, I believe. And so we're at early March in the South, okay? So hives should be really starting to grow, but we're still, 4 to 5 weeks away from split season when splits are usually done. So we're still in the very early spring. So this hive, I think it's a great example of a hive that is just okay. It's nothing special, but I think it's going to be fine. So you open the top and, I see some bees, but there's not a ton of bees in here. So when I start perusing through the top box here, I've got, a few bees on a frame with a little bit of honey. Not a lot going on up here. I mean, it's got some, half-eaten frames of honey. I wouldn't even call that a frame of bees. I mean, it's a frame with bees, but not a frame of bees. Usually to be considered a frame full of bees, it needs to be covered 2/3 on the front and back of the frame. And this is really just some bees hanging out on a frame. Most of the frames up here are pretty empty, kind of like this one. There's really no honey in it to speak of, a few bees, but not a lot going on in this hive, in the top box anyway. So when I lift up, it might have 10 pounds of honey in it, so not a lot of honey. Now our bottom box has a few more bees in it. I would say it has more like 6 frames to 7 frames of bees in it, which is not bad. I mean, it's not 2 boxes bursting at the seams full of bees, but if it was 2 boxes completely full of bees, I'm going to be worried about swarming and I might need to take action. This hive is essentially 1 deep box, 2/3 full of bees, with a mostly empty deep box on top. That's not bad. As long as my mites are under control and I maybe do some feeding over the next 4 to 6 weeks, this hive will probably be splittable by early April. Assuming, of course, it has a good, healthy queen in it and she's laying well. So as I dig down a little bit further, I'm starting to see some pollen. There's not a ton of pollen, but there's some, which is expected for early spring. So you can see those cells of yellow pollen. It's not like we have a frame full of pollen or anything, but we've got, they're clearly bringing in some pollen, and I can see pollen on the bees' legs at the front door, so that's always a good sign. And come on, give me some brood. All right, so now I'm starting to see some brood. So here's some brood, and if you look carefully, you will see the queen. She's actually on this frame. So she's right near the middle. So our queen bee is right here. So you can see her right at the end of the hive tool. Look out, bee. So there she is. We've got brood in this frame. We've got some capped brood, and we have some larvae. But notice for a second with me how spotty that brood is. So you can see there's some capped brood and there's some larvae, and we've got some pollen. But this brood is pretty spotty. So that's something I'm watching out for. That's the first thing I notice when I open this hive is, why is the brood so spotty? So my next thing to do is see, okay, is it spotty throughout the entire hive? or was it just that one frame? Maybe she was laying around something. So check out this frame. Look at all that pollen. So we've got a ton of pollen. So all these cells are completely packed full of pollen. A little bit of brood in the middle. Okay. Brood in the middle here as well. Still fairly spotty. You know, I'm not really thrilled with her brood pattern. So if this queen had a beautiful brood pattern like I would expect to see in early spring when they've got a great pollen flow, I'd say this hive is in great shape. But every frame I'm pulling out, you know, you can see some capped brood. You probably can't see it in the video, but I'm seeing larvae down, eggs and larvae down in those cells. And I'm just not feeling great about this queen because it's not a super strong hive to start with, and her brood pattern just continues to be pretty spotty. So I'm not as confident as I originally said that, oh, you know, give it some time and this hive's going to be ready to split by April. I don't actually look at these hives before I start the videos. I just open a hive and start talking. So I'm kind of diagnosing what's going on in real time. So this hive, I think the queen is probably old and she isn't ramping up like I would like her to. Because yeah, every single frame I'm pulling out, again, quite a bit of eggs and larvae, but just not a great brood pattern throughout the hive. So it's too early to get a queen. You know, we're at early March, so nobody's, you know, I can't get a queen this early in the season. So here's what I'm going to do. This hive is pretty light. There's not a whole lot of excess honey in it. I would say maybe 10 pounds in the top box, you know, maybe 10 pounds in the bottom box. So I'm going to give this hive some syrup. I'm going to give them a couple gallons of 1-to-1 syrup. Maybe they're just too hungry. I don't think that's what's going on, but I'm going to give them some food just to make sure. So I'm going to give them a couple gallons of 1-to-1 syrup or give them a couple sugar bricks. They don't need pollen substitute. They've got plenty of pollen coming in. I'm going to do a mite test. I'll probably stick a sticky board underneath it to make sure our mites aren't too high. I didn't see any signs of mites inside the hive, but don't rely on a visual inspection, so I'm going to make sure the mites aren't too high. If they don't turn around with some syrup, I'm also going to put some complete mixture in that syrup because I did see some larvae that looked a little bit melted and a little bit disfigured. That could be a symptom of a foul brood or something going on with the larvae. So I'm going to give them some syrup with complete in it. I'm going to do a mite test, and I'm going to come back in about 10 days to 2 weeks. And if I don't feel quite a bit better about this hive, if I don't see that brood pattern getting much more compact, much better, then I'm going to requeen this hive as soon as I can get a queen. And that should correct the problem. But, you know, in the meantime, again, syrup with complete mite test. If the mites are high, obviously I'm going to treat them for mites. But I'm 90% sure what's going on with this hive is that old queen is just too old, and it's time to requeen as soon as I can get a queen. So this hive is really strong for the time of year. So here we are again, early March, and this hive already filled up both of their deep boxes. By the way, this is one of those new Propola boxes. We're going to check that out once we go through this hive. They've already filled up both their boxes, and we needed to add another box. Now this is a great problem, but it causes a lot of confusion for a lot of beekeepers. You know, when is it time to add another box? When you add another box, should it be a honey super? Should it be a brood box? You know, there's a lot of questions around when is it time to add honey supers. So here's my rule of thumb. I'm not adding honey supers. I'm not adding boxes that I expect to harvest honey out of until I see major nectar producing flowers starting to bloom. Now, in most areas in the US, you know, unless you're, you know, again in Florida or something, most areas of the US, that's not until at the very earliest, you know, down by the Gulf Coast, you might be looking at, you know, April, perhaps. Most areas, you know, it starts more like May, as you get further from the Gulf Coast, or even, you know, May or June as you go further north. So it's very, very rare, almost non-existent in the United States, that you would be adding honey supers to harvest honey from in March. That essentially doesn't exist. So if your hive is really, really packed full of bees, then you can add boxes, but it's really to give the bees more room to stall until it is time to harvest honey, or to put honey supers on. So when I have a hive like this that already has 2 brood boxes, if both of those brood boxes are 90 to 100% full of bees in March, yes, I'm going to add another box to help prevent them from swarming, and to let them continue to grow. And then I'm probably going to split this hive in early April, as soon as I can get queens and grow more bees. But you've got to do something to prevent them from swarming, because they certainly will swarm in March or April if they run out of room and you can't make a split. So this top box is pretty full of bees. So we added a box. Now, if you're adding a box, it can be a medium box, that's fine. It can be a deep box. Either way, adding a box to give them room is fine. Now, one thing I actually recommend is, if you're adding a box simply to prevent swarming, contrary to what I did here, I would add the empty box at the very bottom of the hive. It really shuts down a hive's swarming tendency if they have empty space between the bottom board and the bottom box. So this medium box we added, next time I would add it between this bottom box and the bottom board. And that, again, really, really tends to shut down that swarming tendency. But I just want to take a look at this hive with you really quickly to show you, you know, this top box is pretty much full of bees, and the bottom box is also full of bees. So, you know, when hives are this full, this early in the season, you've got to do something in order to keep them from swarming, and adding that box to the bottom is my preferred method to prevent that this time of year. Now, you can also take brood from a really strong hive like this, and you can give that brood to weaker hives, and that certainly is an option to slow down this hive's growth and boost up the strength of other hives. Now, in this hive, you know, we have a lot going on. So, beautiful frame of pollen. There's so much pollen, they don't even hardly have room for brood. So you can see you've got this little compact patch of brood up here, and everything else is just pollen, which is beautiful. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, this time of year, I'm wanting to see lots of pollen. Now, the other cool thing is, this hive is already rearing a lot of drones. Woo! Sorry, girls. So you can see we've got a ton of brood, beautiful compact brood patterns here. It's what I want to see this time of year. A lot of brood, a lot of cap brood. I'm not seeing a lot of honey, and that's something you really have to watch out for this time of year, because when they grow so much, I mean, this hive is just growing like crazy. They've got many frames just completely full of brood like this. They can go through a tremendous amount of food in a very short period of time. And there's not a lot of nectar producing flowers blooming yet. So they're usually growing at a rate faster than they can bring in nectar. So unless they had a lot of stores of honey in the hive coming out of winter, they are going to be getting pretty hungry. I mean, this top box probably only weighs 10 pounds. And so I am definitely going to be feeding this hive probably a gallon of syrup, 1-to-1 syrup every week, just to make sure I keep up with their needs as they grow. I got to show you this just because it's what I love about this time of year. Look at this frame. Now I know the sun's kind of going down, so it's getting hard to see. This is a frame completely full of pollen, just an entire frame of pollen. And that's, to me, just so beautiful. I mean, that is what we want to see this time of year, just hives bringing in tons of pollen. They're usually bringing in a whole lot more pollen than they are nectar, which is why we often have to step in and do some feeding. But again, a hive like this, that's growing this fast, keep an eye on the feed, keep an eye on the space, and then again, take some of those frames of brood, pass it off to weaker hives to keep this one from swarming until you get queens to make splits. Let's talk about drones for a second. So if you're new to beekeeping, or even if you're not, folks can have a lot of questions around drones. There can be this perception sometimes for some reason that if you see a lot of drone brood, or if you see a lot of drones, maybe it's a bad thing. Drones, within reason, are a really good thing in a hive. I want to see about 10% of my brood and 10% of my bees in a hive drones. That's a sign of a good, vibrant, healthy hive. They have the resources to be rearing drones. Drones are kind of like a bonus. A really poor, weak hive isn't going to be raising drones because they don't have the resources. When you have hives that are raising drones, raising drone brood, that means that it's a vibrant hive and they've got the spare resources to do so. Now, when it's a problem is when there's more than 10% of the bees in a hive are drones and more than 10% of the brood. And I'm not talking like 12%, I'm talking when it's like all drone brood or 50% drone brood. That's often a sign of a failing queen or a drone laying workers. Now, how do you tell the difference? So a couple things that I look for in a hive when it comes to drone brood. Now I'm going to grab the camera and I'm going to try to show you something. This is always dangerous because I lose my spot. But one cool thing is when you look between the frames in a hive, let's see if I can get this. So when you look between the frames in a hive, you can often see drone brood because bees will typically put drone brood on the edges of frames. So, sorry guys, let me give this hive a little bit of smoke. If you've watched my videos, you know I'm not a professional videographer, but I sure do try. So you can kind of see right down in here, if you look down in there, you can see those big lumpy knobs sticking out. You can't see it super well, but they're there. Here, let me open up the frames a little bit. There, that's better. So you can see these lumpy knobs right there. That's drone brood. You can just see it. If you glance down between the frames, you can often see some drone brood. Now, the other thing I want to show you really quickly is if we take this top box off, or if we lift it up, you'll often see drone larvae between the boxes. So see that white larva right there that the bees are working to remove? That's drone larva. The queen will often lay eggs in between the frames, and when you break the frames apart, it exposes that drone brood, and then of course it dies, but the bees will remove that drone brood between the frames and dispose of it. But that's completely normal to break your boxes apart and see that drone brood exposed. And it's a great time to check for varroa mites. It's not a super accurate test, but if you see a bunch of varroa mites inside this drone brood, that's a problem. So whenever I see this, I always kind of flip through these drone pupa to see if I see any varroa mites. They appear pretty readily because these drones are really white in the the pupa stage, and it's easy to see those brown varroa mites. And I don't see a single one, which is always a great sign. Varroa mites are more attractive to drone pupa, and so usually if you have much of an infestation at all, then you'll see that drone brood covered in varroa mites. So again, but seeing that drone brood is a good thing, and it means this is a very vibrant, healthy hive that is able to raise excess drones, and I'm all for it. It's also a great sign that spring is here. When a hive starts rearing drones, it's a sign that yeah, spring has sprung and they are starting to think about swarming. It doesn't mean that they're, swarming is imminent, but it means they're thinking about it. They're preparing for the possibility of swarming at some point in the future, and they're able to raise drones. Here's a better shot of these. This is the drone brood you can see up here around the edge, and contrast that with, this capped worker bee brood, much smaller, much flatter, versus this big bumpy drone brood around the edge. And they've even got some drone brood that they're rearing down here at the bottom of this frame. You can see there's some drone pupa in there. So this is normal. Bees kind of raising drones around the edge. They might just have a cluster, in one area on the frame where they're raising drones. Here's a drone, speaking of drones, right here. And that's very normal. What I don't want to see is drones brood scattered all around my worker bee brood. So I don't want it to be all mixed together. That's when you have a failing queen. But when it's kind of segmented in its own area, that's very, very normal and perfectly healthy to see in your beehive.
So there you go. That's our In the Bee Yard segment for today. Let me jump back over to our PowerPoint. Here we go. So let's pick up right where we left off. Let's talk about March, spring blooms a little bit. In a lot of the country, you know, the maple's starting to bloom, willow's blooming, elm has already bloomed in a lot of areas. These yellow mustards, dandelions, henbit, you know, we're starting to see quite a bit blooming. So what I watch for when I try to see, you know, is it springtime? I love this picture. This is my oldest daughter. It's an old picture now. She's 9 now, 9.5. She was probably 5 in that picture, and that's actually a really awesome. The purple plant blooms in the spring here in Texas. It's called scabiosa or pincushion. Awesome nectar producing flower. So we went out and picked a bunch so we could show what a nectar producing flower looked like. But some of the things I look for when it comes to spring to tell me, oh yeah, it's really spring. The bees are going to work. Is, you know, drones. We talked about that. Eggs and larvae in the hive is a great indicator. Pollen being brought into the hive. You don't even have to open up your hive. You can just go watch the entrance on a warm, sunny day. And if the bees are bringing in pollen, brood rearing is going on in the hive. I look for increased flight. You know, are the bees really starting to fly? Am I seeing any plants start to bloom? When I start seeing any blooming plants, good sign that the bees are on it. And then, of course, daytime temperatures in the 50s and 60s are an awesome indicator of spring. Just to throw this chart back up here, this is just a general reminder. It can vary by a week or two depending on the year, but this is in general a chart we put together on when a significant pollen flow starts. Now, some years, again, it can vary. You know, up in you know, Minnesota, for example, it's been 50 degrees. It's crazy warm in some areas, and so they're going to see a normal pollen, earlier than normal pollen flow. But on a normal year, this chart is pretty accurate. So I've shown this before. I love these. This is the Spring Leaf Index. So you can Google the National Phenology Network and you can watch this. It updates every single day and it plays a video of the spring leaf out index marching from south to north. And the red, you know, you can see on the graph down there below how much earlier than normal it is versus the blue is later than normal. Now, this was from 2023. So I want you to, this was from March of 2023, March 2nd. So I'm about to show you 2024. So, you know, March 2023 was crazy early across the South and Southeast, a little bit behind in the more in the West. So this is this year. So same date by a couple days difference, but a little more of a mixture. I mean, Southeast Texas is late, very late. You know, parts of Florida are very late. You know, the deep South is pretty much right on schedule. But once we push up into the more central U.S., you're crazy early. West Coast, very early. And so this is the leaf out index. So this is when plants start leafing out. So this is a helpful tool to understand, you know, do I need to think about swarm control earlier than normal, or should I expect my bees to be behind? They also have a bloom index. And so this is when flowers are really starting to bloom in these regions. So obviously it's a little behind the leaf index, but this is the bloom index. And so you can see that, you know, very similar. Deep South is kind of right on schedule. As you start pushing a little further into the northern, southern, and then central, it's really, really early. So Dallas, where I live, is crazy early. Central Valley, California, where I am today, is also crazy early. You know, those pictures I showed you of those blooms falling off the almond trees, it's really early. I don't usually see that for another 7 to 10 days. but it's very early. So helpful tools here for you guys to kind of monitor the spring as it progresses. So let's talk a little bit about feed. Super important this time of year because the bees are growing really, really fast. Like I mentioned in the video, bees can burn through their leftover winter stores crazy fast. My goal from here on out is to maintain 20 pounds of food for a hive that is at least one deep box full of bees. So if they don't have at least 20 pounds in their second box, I'm feeding. I'm feeding 1-to-1 sugar water. I'm not feeding 2-to-1 sugar water anymore this time of year. The bees need 1-to-1. They grow better with 1-to-1. It more naturally mimics nectar. So I'm feeding 1-to-1 syrup from here on out. I'm using a division board or a top feeder rather than an entrance feeder. Bees can get pretty robby this time of year because there's not a lot of nectar producing plants blooming. There's a lot of pollen coming in, but not a lot of nectar coming in. So I like to use feeders that are more contained within the hive to cut down on risks of robbing. And then don't forget to check your hive, 2-3 times at least through the month of March, because like those hives I was checking out in the bee yard today in the video, I mean, those hives had like full boxes full of honey going through the winter. I mean, they were heavy. I was really surprised by how light they already were. They had burned through so much food so fast to rear all that brood. So really, this is the most critical time of year to pay attention to feed. I am using Complete Bee this time of year. You can follow that QR code to get some more information on it, but I'm especially using the Complete product in the spring because it can really help grow bees. It can help clean up brood if there's brood issues like that snotty brood I was seeing in that mediocre hive out in the bee yard. It can help clean up that. The biggest thing that Complete does is less of your developing larva die. Up to 20 to 30% more of your larvae survive when they're fed Complete. And so that's why I like to use it in periods of time when my bees are really growing. This can help them maintain or accelerate that growth, which means a bigger honey crop or more splits if you're trying to split your bees. If you're like, I don't want to split my bees, they're already big and huge, I want them to stop growing. Yeah, you may not want to feed Complete. But if you have a hive that's just mediocre, or if you are wanting to make a lot of splits, or you are trying to make a really big honey crop, Complete can really help accelerate that growth. I'm going to skip over this. We're going to tackle this a lot more in April. We're going to talk a lot about April, about how to take care of newly acquired bees. But in general, most people aren't picking up bees or getting bees until later in April anyway. So we'll tackle that in early April at our next monthly buzz. Pollen patties, largely unnecessary at this point for the southern half of the US. Still helpful if you're in the northern half of the US. Really, no matter where you are, watch for cold weeks and feed pollen patties when you have a week that's below 50 degrees and the bees aren't able to forage, or if you're seeing less than half a frame of stored pollen in your hive, then I would step in and feed pollen substitute. So where I do step in and feed is, again, if my hives are growing like crazy and then they've got a lot of brood, and then we have that cold snap and there's no natural pollen coming in because the bees can't get out and fly for a week, they'll start cannibalizing that brood because they run out of pollen stores in the hive. So if it's a really cold 7 to 10 day period, I'll throw a pollen patty in there just to help them out. Now, I have personally run experiments where even in the middle of a crazy good pollen flow in March, I still have given, I've taken 100 hives and still given them 2 or 3 pollen patties. And then I've taken another 100 hives in the same yard and not given them pollen patties. And the pollen patties still help them grow, even when there is a strong pollen flow. It certainly didn't hurt them. It actually did help accelerate that growth even more. I didn't feel like in that situation it was worth the money. Pollen patties are relatively cheap, but they aren't free. And so I didn't feel like the return was worth the investment. But if you have extra pollen patties or you're really, 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 really wanting your bees to grow a lot, it's certainly not going to hurt to give them pollen patties through the month of March. But if they don't really need it, or you're not trying to hit some crazy growth goals, I don't know that it's really worth the investment unless you have that really cold 7 to 10 day period. March Varroa. So I talked a little bit more about Varroa and treatments and testing in February, so you can check out that Monthly Buzz webinar. But I just want to reiterate that March is the perfect time in the southern half of the United States. April is better in the northern half, to test for Varroa mites. A lot of hives do not need a mite treatment in March, but if you're in the southern half of the United States, March is the time to get a mite treatment on, because your bees don't have as much brood, and you're going to be, before you know it, you're going to be a month away from the honey crop, and it's going to be too late to treat for mites. So I do recommend, if you're in the southern half of the United States, do a test in the month of March, and then treat if they're over 2 per 100 bees. If you're in the northern half of the United States, I would probably wait until early April to do a mite test, and then treat if you're over 2 mites per 100 bees. But that's kind of the window to get a treatment done before your honey flow starts. So we are going to, I keep plugging the April Monthly Buzz here. April's probably the busiest, most packed Monthly Buzz of the year. I'm going to show a video in April. You can get ahead of schedule. You can go to our YouTube channel and look for, spotting eggs and larvae, and watch it ahead of time if you want. But I've got a good video on how to find eggs and larvae in a hive. So I'm going to focus on that a little bit more in April, but I want to touch on it just as your bees are coming out of winter and you're wondering, hey, did my queen make it through the winter? You can follow that QR code to the video if you want, but a little sneak peek, a few tips if you're looking for eggs and larvae would be, when you're holding a frame, make sure the sunlight is shining directly down into those cells. That makes all the difference in the world. The other tip I have is make sure that it's a bright sunny day, the sunlight shining down into the cells, and then take a bunch of pictures with your smartphone. And then you can zoom up on those cells with your smartphone to see if there's eggs in them. And that's what I did in this picture here. You can see the picture on the left. I just took pictures a couple inches away from the cells. And then the picture on the right, I just zoomed up with my smartphone and was able to see, oh yeah, there are eggs in there. Zoomed out, the picture on the far right in the bottom there, that's zoomed out. You really can't see those eggs until you really start zooming in with that smartphone. This frame is super tricky because at a glance, a lot of beekeepers just say, oh, there's definitely nothing in that frame. When in reality is, if you zoom up, it's actually full of eggs in that whole center area. So it can be tricky to spot those eggs, especially in a darker frame like this, which most of our frames are darker. It's tough to spot them without a high power flashlight and good eyes, the sun shining down in it, or taking pictures and zooming in. By the way, total side note here, I didn't mean to talk about this, but I just noticed on this frame. So most of the comb, most of the cells on this frame are just worker bee cells. Check out this kind of bottom right. There's 2 patches on the bottom right where this is drone brood or drone cells. The bees have enlarged those cells to raise drones in those patches of cells. That's perfectly normal. That's how I want and expect to see drones, kind of in a consolidated patch where the bees have raised them, enlarge the cells just to raise drones. And then the rest of the frame is worker bee cells. Very normal to see that. Like I mentioned in the video, what I don't want to see is just a total mixture of drone cells, worker bee cells, all mixed together. That's when you have a failing queen or laying workers. But when you've got these nice little patches of drone brood consolidated in the hive, perfectly normal. Crowded and swarms in March. I'm going to let James and Sherry are going to be talking about this tonight, so I'm not going to steal their thunder, other than to say, general rule of thumb is when any box becomes 80% full of bees, time to add another box. I talked about that out in the bee yard too, so I won't focus on that. Excess old honey still on your hives. This is a good problem, but it's a fairly common problem where your bees came out of winter and they still got, 60 pounds of honey on them. And they've got too much honey. What do you do? So if a hive is less than a deep box full of bees and has more than 50 pounds of honey in the second box, it's unlikely they're going to consume it. If you've got a really strong hive that has so much honey that the queen has nowhere to lay, you got to make room. So here's kind of the two things I do in either situation. One, I transfer that excess honey to hungry hives. So if you've got hives that don't have an excess of honey, you can pull those frames of honey out of that hive, shake the bees off, give it to hives that need it, and then take those empty frames out of those other hives, put it, swap the frames. You get the idea. So that your full frames of honey are in your starving hives or hungry hives, your empty frames are in your hives that has too much honey. And so, I like to pull, 3 or 4 frames of honey out of the middle of the top box in a hive that has too much honey and replace it with 3 or 4 frames that are mostly empty. And that gives the queen a perfect place to go up and start laying. If you don't have any hives that need food, you can just set those frames out 20 to 30 feet away from your hives, and they'll rob those frames out on a warm, sunny day. And then you can put them back into the hive to give the queen some room to lay. So that certainly works as well. Spring requeening, 'tis the season. So March and April are the most common. April is really the most common time of year to requeen. So I recommend requeening proactively every year. We're going to talk a lot about requeening in April, but if your queen is a year old and you haven't ordered queens, get them ordered ASAP, because it's always tough to find queens in the month of April because everyone wants them in April. So get those queens ordered. I recommend just proactively requeening. If you're making splits, which we're going to talk a lot about in April, I'm starting to wonder how we're going to get through everything in April, but we're going to be talking about splits in April too. I requeen everything when I make my splits. So when I make splits, every hive gets a new queen at that point. We also have some classes coming up on splits. So if you want, we've got virtual classes on our website. You can stream at any time, and we have some in-person classes if you're near one of our stores. So you can join those and learn how to split in a bee yard. But we also have several videos on our YouTube channel on how to requeen, how to find queens, all that good stuff. But definitely plan to requeen your hives coming up here very shortly. So before James and Sherry start to whet our appetite for talking about swarms, I'm going to show you my my Swarmzilla video because I just think this one is so cool. This is the biggest swarm that I ever experienced. So check out that swarm. So they actually hadn't landed yet. They were getting ready to land, but look at the size. Look at all the bees in the air. I mean, this swarm was unbelievably massive. Once they landed on this tree, I mean, it was like 10 basketballs size swarm. I mean, it was absolutely massive. I mean, you can just see there's still tens of thousands of bees in the air. This whole tree was like leaning over. There were so many bees on it. Sorry, the quality isn't great. This is like 7 or 8 years ago. Smartphones have come a long way in video capabilities, but yeah. So this was the biggest swarm that I'd ever messed with, I'd ever seen. And to be fair, it was actually because it was several swarms. We had like hundreds of hives in this bee yard, and several swarms swarmed at the same time. And when you have several swarms that swarm at the same time, they'll often kind of merge together into this one mega swarm. And so it was just kind of a perfect situation where I had like 10 swarms all merged together and made this super swarm. So anyway, James and Sherry, great to see you back, James. And I will turn it over to you guys to talk about swarms.
Great, Blake. Well, thank you. We're glad to be here, and I'm glad to be here after basically missing 2 months.
Oh my gosh.
So it's going to be fun tonight. Thank you for your program. It was really good. That looked like a swarm we had last year. I think it may have flown to
No, that
your
wasn't
place.
last year. That wasn't last year, but years ago, I filmed James in the middle of a swarm like that, and he was like, y'all, he was like a little kid in a candy store. He was so excited.
It's kind of fun. You can kind of do this with your hands like you're swimming.
It was a little goofy, but that's all right. So we're doing swarm indicators, and we're not going to delve too far off into what to do with that, but I will tell you it's because in this issue on page 22, Blake, you wrote a very good article about identifying and preventing swarms. And we wanted to really delve into the indicators of what is leading up to not just look at that picture. You think that's a swarm indicator?
Are those
right
drone cells?
That is not drone cells.
That's just done, that's just done as a mention for brand new beekeepers that may not understand the difference between the two.
Yeah.
Queen cells versus drone cells.
Yeah, that's a
Blake
queen
did a
cell.
great job of showing us drone cells.
Yeah, yeah. So yes, welcome back, you.
Thank you.
Gosh, try to do life without you, mister. All right, let's swarm indicators. Look what we wrote here. Begin appearing in early spring, 2 to 4 weeks prior to a major nectar flow. So what did you tell me a while ago is about to bloom?
In Southeast Texas, where we are, our Yopon is within, I would say, a week of blooming. And normally it doesn't bloom until mid-April.
Why do we know that?
Because that's our anniversary.
we got married under Yopon bloom.
So we're completely
We are
out of
early.
sync with normal years.
Yeah.
We're going to have, while Yopon is not our major nectar flow, it's a semi-major that will stimulate our bees to the point where we need to understand what their capabilities are within each hive. And that's what we want to talk about tonight, swarm indicators, as opposed to so much things to do when a swarm is imminent.
Touch on it.
We'd like to try to avoid that possibility and understand the things we can look at.
To keep, yeah, he's saying we don't want you to swarm. Yeah, we don't want you to swarm. All right, so just like Blake was saying, brood congestion, including adult workers.
Now that's a topic that if you're deep into beekeeping, you won't understand. There's a concept in learning about the biology of the bee called polytheism. And when a colony is preparing to swarm, the nurse bees, after emergence, rather than working their way from the bottom of the box or the center of the box to the entrance like they normally would as progression during that 22 days that they live inside the colony, they find themselves compacting or congregating on a brood frame congested with other bees, and they're actually not actually doing anything. They're sort of hanging out, docile, don't really understand their purpose. I think they're talking to each other about when's the day gonna come? When can we leave? When
Are we
can
done
we
it?
leave?
Yeah.
But the normal sequence of the concept of polytheism is not so much in place to where they go through the idea of we're going to clean cells, we're going to feed larvae, they skip through some of that because, as we'll talk about in a few minutes, that larva is starting to sink when you're approaching swarm season.
So they're really not letting some of them age into foragers. That's really interesting to me that they're actually slowing down, and we really read about this, and I know it sounds weird and like they wouldn't do that, but there's this whole system that has to take place in order for this swarm to happen, which it takes 2 or 3 weeks for all of these to come together to create a swarm. So they don't just wake up one day and go, you know what, I think we're going to swarm.
You know, we mentioned that 2 to 4 week set of numbers a while ago, but actually it takes a full 6 weeks from the time the first bee said,
yeah,
to the time they actually leave for a 6 week period. So we were talking about those adult bees that were just nurse bees a short time ago. Once that concept happens and they're sitting on that brood frame, the pheromones that they put out hamper the stimulation of new brood, of egg laying and larva production. So we're beginning a sequence of evacuating brood within that hive so that that swarm, if it were to occur, has less bees or less larvae to take care of, less pupa to take care of.
Tend, yeah.
Yeah, there we go.
Isn't that interesting?
So just backing up.
Okay,
Field
so-
brood greatly outnumbers open brood. Now that makes sense,
It
doesn't
does.
it? If we have 10 frames in a box and we have 6 frames of sealed brood and 3 frames of other resources,
Food.
nectar, pollen, think what's going to happen. That 1 to 3 rule, that's just something I make up to pretend like I know what I'm
I want
talking
to
about.
explain that. So what that,
But the 1 to 3, Sherry's going to talk about.
I told you, Blake, he was gonna be so itchy to talk that I wasn't gonna get a word in. And this is what's happening. I'm all right with that. I'll just sit back. But I want to tell you about the 1 to 3 rule, because we were teaching at a bee school this last weekend. And that really fascinates folks, that when you have a full frame of brood, capped brood, when it's just one frame, right? When it emerges, the amount of bees that emerge will actually congregate and take up the space of 3 frames. Because when a bee is this way in a cell and you got them all stacked like this, because they're in the cell getting ready to emerge, they're sideways. But when they emerge, they're perpendicular to that frame, so they take up much more space. 1 to 3.
Vertical
Interesting.
versus horizontal.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be a whole frame that we're talking about. It could be a half a frame or anything.
Right.
When one bee emerges, the space it occupies after emergence
Triples.
is 3 times the space of where it grew
Triples.
up.
Few empty cells. I think that makes sense, that there's just not anywhere for anything to go. They run out of space.
Following the following bullet point, all frames are mostly drawn.
Yeah, there won't be empty frames in there. They would have stayed. They would have stayed to build those out. So if you see an open frame in there or 2, you're good for a minute. You should be good for a minute. Entrance is crowded. Boy, we do this. To me is like at the end when they start, it's just getting where they're just boiling out the front. It's like there's not enough room for them all to fit. That's really what you're going to see, is that it's going to be adult workers, and there's going to be that up to that top bullet point there. It's them staying home, not going out and doing anything so much. They're sitting there waiting for the swarm to actually happen.
And that and the bearding concept that
Follows that.
Regardless of temperature is very important, because if we have bearding and it's cool outside as opposed to it being hot outside, when it's hot outside, yes, maybe they're just cooling the hive, but on a day that it's in the 70s or 80s and you've got a colony that's got the face of the box bearded up, something's up. It's evidence that the bearding may have a root cause.
Got a queen stuck in there somewhere, doesn't it?
Maybe, maybe not, but maybe at some point in the future it will.
Right.
Here's a real common thing.
Yeah.
You know, we tell new beekeepers that the presence of white wax is a sign of a nectar flow.
It is.
Well, and that's true, but it's also a sign that
if you see it in places, it's not in place, like on a frame. On the right-hand picture, it's hard to tell, there's 2 pictures, there's one on the right and one on the left. Look how that's starting to build on the top of the frame. It's because there's no space left to build it on the frames.
you can tell by looking at those frames that they're mature frames, they're fully drawn out.
Mature and then old.
Mature, I like that. There's no place to put new wax there, yet nectar is coming in.
Yep.
So it has to go somewhere.
Look at this one. Look at this picture. They're just building it on top. This is a nuke. It's hard to tell. I should have probably separated these pictures. So this is a 4-frame nuke. I don't know where I found this picture, but that's 4 frame. They ran out the room, and I'm not sure why it had a division board feeder in there. That makes you go,
Well, it's got
because
4 frames.
I know it took up a lot of space, and you can see they've just run out of space. If that little nuke right there doesn't swarm, I'd be shocked.
I think a key component of the white wax is that it's we're addressing randomly placed.
Randomly
Now, that's
placed.
not referring so much to wax that's
frames.
being built for drone cells, because as Blake was showing, that can go anywhere, and it's typically around the peripheral hive. But when there's just no place to put it and they start filling it with nectar to make honey out of it, that's an indication that we are completely out of space, and if we don't address it, something's gonna
Something's
happen.
wrong, something's wrong. All right, this is James's favorite slide of the day, okay? We talked a lot about it, and I'm gonna give credit where credit's due. This is a Randy Oliver slide, and if anybody that's listened to Randy Oliver or gone to scientificbeekeeping.com, super deep dude. We've met him multiple times or talked to him multiple times in person. This is interesting. I'm gonna let you just go at it because you love this portion.
So much of this is my own interpretation, but collapse of the energy interface. I was talking to some beekeepers at that event that Sherry was talking about, how it's quite often that there is a single row or segment of cells between capped honey and pollen that is noted as, I call it a nectar band, but Randy Oliver calls it the energy interface, where the carbohydrates from the honey are adjacent to but separated from the protein of the pollen. And as that colony or as that frame matures, we know that those cells with larvae in it and cap pupa, they start moving outwards because the queen is working from the center of the box,
Right.
center of the frame. So it's just a natural progression. When we have a reversal of that, I call it collapsing of that interface, meaning that that open row of cells going downward towards where the brood is in the middle of the frame, I call it collapsing because all of that pollen is being used up and backfilled with new nectar. So that brood nest is collapsing upon itself. First sign being, if we were to take a pin and put a red dot right there where that arrow is and go back in a few days and look at it again, did it go outward towards the out of the frame or did it go down towards the middle of the frame? If it's moving downwards, that's the first sign of backfilling of the brood nest.
Genius, right? I thought it was too, y'all.
And again, that's the beginning of queen. If we look across the bottom of
Brood
it,
frames are full of resources. High pollen flow present.
queen's egg laying is reduced because
they're pinching her down,
collapsing it.
That's right.
High pollen flow being present is generally a condition of that occurring. You'll have to think about that. I'm not going to go into it, but that is a requirement of a collapsing of an energy interface, or again, I like to say nectar band.
Yeah, that's cool, isn't it?
So that's kind of like reaching out a long ways, but it's fun. That's the kind of thing that we all like to study once we feel like we've got a handle on some particular topic. That's good stuff.
Well, and you did. He delved really deep into it, and I felt his excitement getting into that. So, but backfilling brood nest, that's what it is. It's just basically backfilling the brood nest. It's open cells being filled with what used to be for brood is now being filled with nectar. You can tell on this picture, it's a little bit fuzzy, but you can see that's nectar. As that brood is emerging, they're packing it because there's nowhere else to put it. So what are they going to do?
That slide has several important notations.
It really does.
We have white wax on the side.
Yeah.
Because the bees had a place to put it. So they built foundation out of it.
It looks like a honey super frame to me.
It possibly
It just may be.
We look at the middle where the center has had
brood.
Bees emerge. But we have capped brood around the perimeter of it, and right in, I don't know if you can see Sherry's arrow or not.
Yeah, I think that can.
Directly under or directly over, answer the question, where would the brood interface be? Or the energy interface be? I don't see any pollen there. Well, we don't, so it's not a concern. That frame is not in danger of threatening the rest of the colony for swarming conditions.
You don't think?
Nope, I don't think.
Isn't that interesting? An overabundance of drone brood. I think this was the first thing we learned. And as a matter of fact, I know it is because we took it literally. Our mentor or somebody, well, I won't blame our mentor, because somebody said, if you got a bunch of drone brood, that's a sign you're going to swarm. And James and Sherry heard kill drone brood.
Can we?
I did. And I remember kind of doing that. And that was early on. You know how you can absorb all this information and you put it all in your brain, and your brain doesn't always decipher it correctly. Well, some place in there, I thought, that means we don't need all that drone brood. And I started kind of destroying some of it, and that probably, it was just a signal that there was gonna be a problem.
Well, when a colony of bees is creating drones, it means that the colony is healthy,
It does.
because drones require a lot of energy to be consumed to not only create them, but to support them. Because remember, they don't do anything. They're just there waiting for their time.
They do nothing.
And so it's an expense having drones within the colony. Now, we do destroy drone cells where we're practicing some IBM concepts of green drone frames. But, you know, that's our intent when we put that
Right.
frame in.
Sure.
It's to be destroyed, to freeze them or do whatever we need to do.
Prior to emerging.
Right, and that's a great varroa control or a good measure to
Mhm.
do a rough count of what our varroa population may be.
But if you see on, and this is a brood frame, you can see the capped brood to the left, upper left there, that's good, perfectly good regular worker brood, but that's a lot of drone brood.
Yeah.
And drone brood between the boxes tends to be where we see it, or on the outer edges. 15% is your normal drone percentage of a colony, so 85% worker bees, 15% drone.
And that would qualify during a nectar flow.
During nectar flow, and this is a lot more than 15%. So that would be a good
Well, the
indicator.
drones are all well and good. Gosh,
Yeah.
look at that frame.
That is an unhappy frame.
So one of the first things we see as an indicator in a colony is when we see an excessive number of cups, queen cups. Maybe they haven't been drawn out any further than the two that you see in that picture, or 3 or 4 that we have there. But they're present and they're increasing in numbers as the threat of swarming gets closer and closer. We have the drone cup or the queen cups virtually any time of year. But that expansion is a real clue that we need to start watching them and see where else they are. And are they increasing in numbers?
Well, and I think that's key because, you know, especially in split season, it is not at all uncommon, y'all, for even when we're purchasing, getting a new nuke or something, in that split scenario, making the splits, because we talked so much about that tonight and will next month as well. The bees kind of, you know, there's so much unrest during that event that they'll make queen cups, but the rule of thumb is don't worry about it. If there's not larvae in it, 1 or 2 is fine. That's just an apartment being ready in case they need it, right? But when you see a lot of them start happening and you do see a larva being put in there, that is your
It's time to
indicator.
get your hive tool and start clipping
Oh,
the
yeah.
edge of it, lifting it up and ensuring that there is not an egg having been laid there, or there's not a larva growing in there.
That's right.
If there is, just go ahead and clip it,
Get it done
and
with
don't
it.
worry about it. You're not hurting anything. You're not stopping a swarm. You're just proving to yourself
Yeah.
one way or the other
Sure.
whether that's going to be an active cell or not.
Yeah. Maybe next month we can do thwarting a swarm that's in process. That might be something we do next month.
This would be what occurs once those cells got away.
Look at that.
We can look at the top right of that picture and pretty much a certainty that there's
That
larvae there.
emerged.
And the reason I would say that is there's 2 or 3 other.
These emerged. Look, that one emerged.
I had noticed
See,
before.
that's chewed. That one's chewed and this one's,
So
this
that's
one
what happens
went
when we're not staying on top of those cups we were talking about, and all the other indicators that come together. There's nothing there about white wax. This is all mature. Everything's
We're
present.
past that.
Correct. That's all said and done. So we're looking at a mature frame that swarming is going to occur, be it man-made or be it bee-made.
Yeah, we
That'd
want
be a
it to
good
be.
name for an apiary maintenance company, bee maids.
It would. So does this picture look familiar? This is a snapshot of that swarm that Blake was just showing us. That's a lot of darn bees, okay? Are they about to swarm? I love this. 2,300 years ago, Aristotle found a way to answer the question. When the flight of a swarm is imminent, a monotonous and quite peculiar sound made by all the bees is heard for several days. So they're talking to you. Remember that article you wrote years ago? Well, 3 years ago about bees do talk. They're talking to you. They do make it's a roar. there's a different sound in the hive, and that's not a visual, it's one of your other senses, but that's kind of interesting, isn't it?
Auditory sense.
Auditory.
There's a very intense area of studying beekeeping that's again the audio concept where they're using various high-tech equipment to monitor the sounds that bees make, the piping, the quacking that queens do, and a variety of things. But one of those is also the beginning of the that monotonous sound, as he said, Aristotle said. Well, we hear that within colonies. We know something's up. We know we've fallen behind, and that they are in swarm mode. That may happen in a day, may happen in 3 days, may happen in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But our time for having corrected the problem on a response to indicators is past. Now it's time we have to assist them in making a split. What's a major component of a swarm split? I would say the first thing I think of is the queen has to move with the new split colony.
Somebody asked me that question. So if you've got those swarm cells and you're forced to make a split, yes, you move the queen with the split, the old queen with the split.
If not, there's nothing to tell them that the swarm has been completed, and that's all it takes.
Typically.
Just moving the queen, because the queen is going to swarm.
Ta-da.
Well, that's a lot of stuff. Some of it's frivolous within the concept of indicators. And we wanted to do more detail on swarm prevention or swarm management. But at the classes that Sherry was talking about last weekend, we had a number of people who wanted to know about swarm indicators, what some of the obvious things are.
Well, knowing what you're looking for makes a big difference in how you react. We're always supposed to be reactive. We're proactive, not reactive, right? So maybe that's what we did. Hopefully we helped.
I hope so too.
That's awesome. Thank you guys. I learned a few things. I left a few questions for you in the Q&A box. I got to almost all of them, but not quite all of them. So that's about it, guys. So just as a reminder, we'll send a link to the recording out in the next couple of days, along with a link to videos we mentioned and our monthly magazine. We're going to end a couple minutes early. I have some bees I've got to go work. So I'm going to scoot off and do that. Thank you for your time this evening. It's always great to spend the evening with you guys. And can't wait to see you in April. Don't miss the April monthly buzz. It's going to be a critical one. If you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box. Happy to continue answering those. And otherwise, check out that bee warranty, and we'll see you in April. Have a good evening, folks. Bye.